Hello, Mark. I'm Mitch. I'm number 22. Deborah Golden, the emergent genius of ant colonies, and I'm from Junior. I study ant, and that's because I like to think about how organization work, and in particular how the simple part of organization interact to create the behavior of the whole organization. So ant colonies are a good example of an organization like that. And there are many others. The web is one. There are many biological systems like that. Brain cells developing embryos. There are about 10,000 species of ants. They all live in the colony consisting of one or a few queens, and then all the ants you see walking around the sterile female workers. And all ants can colonies have in common that there's no central control. Nobody tells anybody what to do. The queen just lays the eggs. There's no management. No ant directs the behavior of any other ant. And I try to figure out how that works. And I have been working for the past 20 years on a population of seed-eating ants in southeastern Arizona. Here's my study site. This is really a picture of ants, and the rabbit just happened to be there. And these ants are called harvester ants because they eat seed. This is the nest of the mature colony, and there's the net entrance, and they forage maybe for about 20 meters away, gather up the seed and bring them back to the nest and store them. And every year I go to there and make a map of my study site. This is just a road, and it's not very big. It's about 250 meters on one side, 400 on the other. And every colony has a name, which is a number, which is painted on a rock. And I go there every year and look for all the colonies that were alive the year before and figure out which ones have died and put all the new ones on the map. And by doing this, I know how old they all are, and because of that, I have been able to study how their behavior changes as the colony gets older and larger. So I want to show you about the life cycle of a colony. Ants never make more ants. Colonies make more colonies. And they do that because by each year sending out the reproductive, those are the ones with wings on a mating flight. So every year on the same day, and it's a mystery exactly how that happens. Each colony sends out its virgin, unmated queens with wings, and the males, and they all fly to a common place, and they mate. And this shows a recently virgin queen. Here's her wing, and she's in the process of mating with this male. And there's another male on the top waiting his turn. Often the queens mate more than once. And after that, all the males all died. That is for them, after. And the newly mated queens fly off somewhere, drop their wings, dig a hole, and go into that hole and start laying eggs. And they will live for 15 or 20 years, continuing to lay eggs using the sperm from their original mating. So queen goes down in there. She lay eggs, she feeds the larvae, and an egg starts as an egg. It's a larva. She feeds the larvae by regurgitating from her fat reserves. Then as soon as the first group of ants emerge, they are larvae. They are pupae. Then they come out as adult ants. They go out, they get the food, they dig the nest, and the queen never comes out again. So this is 1 year old colony. This happened to be 536. There's a nest entrance. There is a pencil for a skull. So this is the colony founded by a queen previous summer. This is a 3-year-old colony. There is the nest entrance. There is pencil for skull. They make a pile of refuse. Mostly the husk of the seed that they eat. This is a 5-year-old colony. This is the nest entrance. Here's a pencil for skill. This is about as big as they get, about a meter across. And then this is how colony size and numbers of workers ants changes. So this is about 10,000 workers ants changes as a function of colony age in years. So it starts out with 0 ants. It just as the founding queens, and it grows to a size of about 10 or 12,000 ants when the colony is 5, and it stays the size until the queen dies and there is nobody to make more ants. When she's about 15 or 20 years old, and it's when they reach the stable size in numbers of ants that they started to reproduce. That is to send more queens and male to the year mating flight. And I know how colony size changes as a function of colony age because I've dug up colonies of known age and contacted all the ants left her. So that's not the most fun part of this research, although it's interesting. Left her. Really, the question that I think about with this ant is what I call task collation. That is not just how is the colony organized, but how does it change what it is doing? How is it that the colony manages to adjust the number of workers performing each task as conditions change? So things happen to an ant colony. When it rains in the summer, it floods in the desert. There is a lot of damage to the nest, and extra ants are needed to clean up the mess when the extra food becomes available. And this is what everybody knows about picnics. The extra ants are allocated to collect the food. So with nobody telling anybody what to do, how is it the colony manages to adjust the number of workers performing each task? And that's the process that I call task allocation. And in the harvester ant, I divided the tags of ant I see just outside the nest into these 4 categories, where an ant is foraging, when it's out along the foraging trail, searching for food or bringing food back. The patrollers that's supposed to be a magnifying glass, and are an interesting group that go out early in the morning before the foragers are active. They somehow choose the direction that foragers will go, and by coming back just by backing it back, they tell the foragers that it's safe to go. Then the nest maintenance workers work inside the nest, and I want to say that the nest look a lot like Bill Lisherman's house. That is, there are chambers inside. They lie in walls and the chambers with moist soil, and it dries to a kind of adobe-like surface in it. It's also like very similar to some of the cave dwelling of the Hopi people. They are in that area, and the nest maintenance workers do that inside the nest, and they come out of the nest carrying bits of dry soil in their mandibles. So you see the nest maintenance worker come out with a bit of sand, put it down, turn around, and go back in. And finally, the medium workers put some kind of a territorial chemical in the garbage. So what you see the medium worker doing is making a pile of refuse. One day it will all be here, and then the next day they will move it over there, and then they will move it back. So that's what the medium worker do. And these 4 groups are just the ants outside the nest. So that's only about 25% of the colony, and they are the oldest ants. So an ant starts out somewhere near the queen, and when we dig up nest, we find that they are about as deep as the colony is wide. So about a meter deep for the big old nest. Then there is another long tunnel and chamber, where we often find a queen after 8 hours of hacking away at the rocks with picked successes. I don't think that chamber has evolved because of me and my backhaul of my crew of students with peacock sizes, but instead because when there is flooding, occasionally the colony has to go down deep. So there's this whole network of chambers. The queen is in there somewhere. She just laid eggs. They're the larvae and they consume most of the food. And this is true of the most ants. That the ants you see walking around don't do much eating. They bring it back and feed it to the larvae. When the foragers come in with food, they just drop it into the upper chamber and other ants come up from below, get the food, bring it back, cut the seed, and pile it up. They are nest maintenance workers working throughout the nest, and curiously and interestingly, it looks as though at any time about half the ants in the colony are just doing nothing. So despite what is said in the Bible about look to the ants, they staggered. In fact, you couldn't think of those ants are reserves. This is to say if something happened, and I have never seen anything like this happen, but I have been looking for 20 years. If something happened, they might all come out if they were needed, but in fact, mostly they are just hanging around in here. And I think it's a very interesting question. What is there about the ways that the colony is organized that might give some functions to a reserve of ants who are doing nothing, and they sort of stand as a buffer in between the ants working deep inside the nest and the ants working outside. And if you mark ants, they are working outside and dig up a colony. You never see them dig down. So what's happening is that the ants work inside the nest when they are younger. They somehow get into the reserves, and then eventually they get recruited to join the exterior workforce. And once they belong to the ants that work outside, they never go back down. Now ants, most ants including this, don't see very well. They have eyes. They can distinguish between light and dark, but they mostly work very by smell. So just to reinforce that what you might have thought about the queens isn't true. Even if the queen did have the intelligence to send chemical messages through this whole network of chambers to tell the ants outside what to do, there is no way that such messages could make it in time to see the shift in the allocations of workers that we actually see outside the nest. So that's one way that we know the queen isn't directing the behavior of colony. So when I first set out to work on the task allocation, my first question was, what's the relationship between the ants doing different tasks? Does it matter to the foragers what the nest maintenance workers are doing? Does it matter to the maiden workers that the patrollers are doing? And I was working in the context of view of the ant colonies in which each ant was somehow dedicated to its task from birth and sort of perform independently of the others, knowing its place on the assembling line. And instead, I wanted to ask how are the different task groups interdependent. So I did experiments where I changed one thing. For example, I created more text for the nest maintenance worker by putting out a pile of toothpicks near the nest entrance early in the morning when the nest maintenance workers are first active. This is what it looks like about 20 minutes later. Here it is about 40 minutes later, and the nest maintenance workers just take all the toothpicks to the outer edge of the nest mound and leave them there. And what I wanted to know was, okay, here's a situation where extra nest maintenance workers were recruited. Is this going to have any effect on the workers performing other tasks? Then we repeated all those experiments with the ants mark. So here's some blue nest maintenance workers, and lately we have gotten more sophisticated And we have this three color system, and we can mark them individually so we know which ant is which. We started out with the metal airplane pants, then we found these wonderful little Japanese markers, and they work really well. And so just to summarize the result, well, it turns out that yes, the different texts are interdependent. So if I change the numbers performing one task, it changes the numbers performing another. So for example, if I make the mess that the next maintenance worker has to clean up, then I see fewer ants out foraging. And this was true for all the pairwise combination of tasks. And the second result, which was surprising to a lot of people, was that the ants actually switch tasks. The same ant doesn't do the same task over and over its whole life. So for example, if I put out extra food, everybody else, the medium workers, stop doing medium work and get out the food. They become foragers. The next maintenance workers become foragers. The patrollers become foragers. But not every transition is possible. And this shows how it works. Like I just said, if there's more food to collect, the patrollers, the medium workers, the next maintenance worker will all change to forage. It There's more patrolling to do, so I created a disturbance, so extra patrollers were needed. The next maintenance worker will switch to patrollers, but if more next maintenance work is needed, for example, if I put out a bunch of toothpicks, then nobody will ever switch back to next maintenance. They have to get next maintenance worker from inside to the next, so foraging acts as a sink and the ant inside the nest acts as a source. And finally, it looks like each ant is decided moment to moment whether to active or not. So for example, when this extra nest maintenance work to do, it's not that the foragers switch over. I know that they don't do that, but the foragers somehow decide not to come out. And here's how most intriguing result. The task allocation. The process changes with colony age, and it changes like this when I do this experiments with older colonies. So once they are 5 years or older, they are much more consistent from one time to another and much more homeostatic. The worse things gets, the more I hassle them, the more they act like undisturbed colonies. Whereas the young small colony, the 2-year-old colonies of just 2,000 ants, are much more variable. And the amazing thing about this is that an ant lives only a year. It could be this year or this year. So the ants in the older colony that seem to be more stable are not on any other older than the ants in the younger colony. It's not due to the experience of older, wiser ants. Instead, something about the organization must be changing as the colony gets older, and the obvious thing that's changing is size. So since I have this result, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of the decision rules. Very simple, local, probably of factory chemicals rule can and could an ant could be using, since no ant can assess the global situation, that would have the outcome that I see this predictable dynamic in who does what task, and it would change as the colony gets larger. And what I found out is that ants are using a network of internal contact. So anybody who ever look at ant has them touch Anthony. They smell with their antennae. When one ant touches another, it's smelling it, and it can tell, for example, whether the other ant is a nest mat because ants never cover themselves and each other through grooming with a layer of grease, which carries a colony-specific odor. And what we are learning is that an ant uses the pattern of internal context, the rate at which it meets ends of other texts. in deciding what to do, and so what the message is, it's not only message they transmit from one end to another, but the pattern. The pattern itself is the message. I will tell you a little bit more about that. But first, you might be wondering how this is an egg can tell. For example, I'm a forager. I expect to meet another forager every so often. But if instead I start to meet a higher number of nest maintenance workers, I'm less likely to forage. So it has to know differences between a forager and nest maintenance worker, and we have learned that in this species, and I suspect in others as well, these hydrocarbons, this layer of grease on the outside end is different as and perform different tasks. And we have done experiments that show that there's because the longer and stay outside, the more the simple hydrocarbons on the surface change. And so they become to smell different by doing different tasks, and they can use the task specific odor in particular hydrocarbons they can use in their belief internal contact to somehow keep track the rate at which they are meeting end of certain tasks. And we've just recently demonstrated by this putting extra hydrocarbons on little glass beads and dropping the beads gently down into the nest entrance at the right rate. And it turns out that ants will respond to the right rate of contact with a glass bead with hydrocarbon extra on it, and they will contact with real ants. So I want now to show you a video, and this will start out first of all showing you that the nest entrance. So the idea is that ants are coming in and out of the nest entrance. They've gone out to the different tags, and the rate at which they meet as they come in and out of the nest entrance determines or influence each ant's decision about whether to go out or which task to perform. This is taken through a fiber optics microscope. As down inside the nest is the beginning, you see the ant just like engaging with the fiber optics microscope. But the idea that the ants are in there and each is experiencing a certain flow of an ant passive, a string contact with another ant. And the pattern of this interaction determines whether the ant comes back out. And when it comes back, you can also see this in the ants just outside the nest entrance like this. Each ant then as it comes back in is contacting other ants, and the ants that are waiting just inside the nest entrance to decide whether to go out on their next trip are contacting ants coming in. So what's interesting about this system is that it's messy, it's variable, it's noisy, and in particular in two ways. The first is that the experience of each ant can be very predictable because the rate at which ants come back depends on all little things that happen to ant as it goes out and does it takes outside. And second thing is that an ant's ability to access the pattern must be very crude because no ant can do any sophisticated counting. So we do a lot of simulation and modeling and also experimental work to try figure out how those two kinds of noise combine to in the aggregate produce the predictable behavior and colonies. Again, I don't want to say that this kind of haphazard pattern of interaction produce a factory that works with the precision and efficiency of clockwork. In fact, if you watch ants at all, you end up trying to help them because they never seem to be doing anything exactly the way that you think they will how to be doing it. So it's not really that out of this haphazard context perfection arrived, but it's worked pretty well. Ants have been around for several hundred million years. They cover the Earth except for Antarctica. Antarctica. Sometimes something that are doing is clearly successful enough that this pattern of haphazard contacts in the aggregate produce something that allowed ants to make a lot more ants. And one of the things that we are studying is how natural selection might be acting now to shape this issue. Use of interaction patterns. This network of interaction patterns to perhaps increase the foraging efficiency of ant colonies. So the one thing though that I want you to remember about this is that these patterns of interactions are something that you expect to be closely connected to colony size. The simplest idea is that when an ant is in a small colony and an ant is in a large colony can use the same rule, like I expect to meet another foragers every 3 seconds, but in a small colony it's like to meet fewer foragers. Just because there are fewer other foragers there are to be met. So this is kind of rule that as colony develops, gets older and larger, will produce different behavior in an old colony and a small young one. Thank you. Applause. This is the end of my recording. Thank you, Mark. Bye bye.